Everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News, June 27th, 2024. Big debate tonight, and I am expecting the BEAD program to come up. I'll be right back with reasons why. Hey there, Rick Uzzi with Broadband Deployment News. So, as I say, I'm expecting the BEAD program to come up tonight in the debate, and it will most likely be associated with maybe mentioned as the Infrastructure Act, and all of, I think it would first come up with Biden kind of touting that, and then, some of the items in there have become political football recently. You've got the, $7.5 billion that are supposed to go towards EV charging stations. And what we've heard recently is only 7 or 8 charging stations have been deployed so far in the 3 years since the bill was passed. So that's been a political talking point. And I've noticed recently that BEAD has become a political football, as well as some Republicans now are talking about the fact that we're 3 years into that, and we've yet to see a single shovel of dirt turned as far as actually deploying any broadband from that program. So if the Biden administration, if Joe Biden in the debate brings up the Infrastructure Act and talks about how he's bringing broadband to various parts of the country, if Trump is prepared at all, and when I say prepared at all, if they have prepared him at all, then that would be the likely comeback. Now, he tends to be the kind of guy that kind of wings it. So I don't know how much preparation he's getting. I know Biden's been prepping hard for the last 2 weeks or so, or certainly a week. Now, Trump has not been out. I haven't seen him out in the campaign trail in a few days, so he may actually be doing some prepping. And like I say, if he's getting prep from his folks, they will have an answer for that. So that's where that would come from. If he's going to wing it, then he may miss the opportunity. But to say that, but again, it's become a political football, and I think it will remain that way until the election occurs, because it's just something that both sides are going to seize on. One is going to tout the fact that a lot of this money has been put forward to help increase broadband services in the United States, and then the other side will say, well, yeah, show me where the money's going. That it's been a long delay, and there have been delays that are exacerbated by some of the things that are in the notice of funding opportunity from the Biden administration. So wanted to talk about that today and go through some of these things. So you see here, 2024, let me go and make a bigger screen. I think I'll do that. 2024 hasn't been year of execution for BEAD. This was in Fierce Networks here. And you see 1 year has passed since the White House announced how much money each state and territory will receive from the $42.5 billion BEAD program, but those dollars have yet to make it out the door. There's an undeniable tension between the urgent need to close the digital divide and the time that's required to create a well-functioning government program, said Jake Varn, Associate Manager for Pew's Broadband Access Initiative. And he's right. You wouldn't want to pass this and say, okay, we've got $42.5 billion, and then in 6 months be allocating that without any kinds of controls. We had the broadband map. So a lot of things, these delays were necessary. Getting the map done was a significant portion of what took so long to get things kind of starting rolling. And that was really important, because we really didn't know who had broadband and who didn't, and for those who had it, what the speeds were, at least the advertised speeds. So all that had to be done. So there's certain delays that you could expect when you're talking about this much money. And certainly we do, as he mentions here, I think we do want to make sure that we're spending the money wisely. It says, thus far, BEAD has been a game of hurry up and wait. States didn't get immediate access to their BEAD allocations when the figures were announced. NTI required eligible entities to submit an initial proposal. NTI, which previously touted 2024 as the year of execution for BEAD, is still chipping away at approving those proposals. It's no secret that struggling communications industry is pinning its hopes on BEAD money for a revenue boost, but funding delays could quash those hopes. And that has been noticed in the industry. We've seen, again, you got this hurry up and wait thing. So there's the Buy American stuff. So a lot of equipment manufacturers or fiber manufacturers have been doing what they can to make sure that they start onshoring that so that they can get their equipment or fiber materials as being something that would be approved for BEAD. So that's been going on, and equipment manufacturers have to kind of consider, okay, well, how far ahead do we need to get on this? The same with the people creating fiber and all the stuff that goes along with that. So, we've seen some stocks take a hit because there's kind of a slowdown in the industry. As I think also as some service providers are holding off on any expansions or maybe on equipment purchases, kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. Are they going to submit for BEAD? Are they planning on submitting for BEAD and don't want to start getting a bunch of inventory in prior to that? So it's certainly caused some issues, I think. So certainly there can be a boom later, but it's been a bit of a lull recently. While frustrating for broadband vendors, the process for allocated funds to trickle down into projects that break ground should have been anticipated, said Leonard Lee, executive analyst and founder at Next Curve. And it should have been to some extent, although I don't know if a lot of people were expecting it to be this long. I think in the initial stages, people were thinking that by now we would have had subgrantees selected and maybe even some building starting to happen this year, but that's not going to be the case. Indeed, getting Volume 2 green-lit allows states to request up to 20% of their allocated money and begin selecting award subgrantees. But again, that money is not going to go towards deployment, as far as I know. I believe they can start selecting subgrantees, but it'd be very unlikely that they'd be allocating any money towards the actual deployment yet. Once states get their Volume 2 approved, now this is crazy. I don't think any state's going to wait this long, but well, maybe a few will that are just not on top of things. But once states get their Volume 2 approved, they have 365 days to select projects and submit a final list to NTIA for review. So once their complete initial proposal, Volume 1 and 2, is approved, they have a year after that. So, there you go. A year from today would be if somebody got approved today. So when will BEAD deployment actually get started? Obviously, BEAD is a large-scale endeavor with a multi-year timeline. Funding isn't expected to start reaching projects until 2025 at the earliest, and that would be true. BEAD reality check. Varden told Fierce it's important to remember BEAD is the first time Congress has set a goal and deadline for achieving universal affordable broadband coverage. Furthermore, it's a huge investment in internet infrastructure that won't come again anytime soon, and reaching universal coverage requires a lot of planning. It's important for states and the TIA to measure twice and cut once, Varn said. Again, I agree with this. I think it could have been done more efficiently, and there could have been fewer roadblocks that didn't need to be there that have caused some issues. So I think there is that to be said. But it's true, if we're going to be spending this much money, we want to make sure we do it right. We want to make sure that we're only deploying broadband where broadband is needed and not overbuilding areas that already have broadband. So, I see his point, but again, I think things could have been done a little more efficiently. NTI's challenge process tracker lists the states that are actively determining which locations are eligible for BEAD funds. And again, that's another part of the process. So we have the map that was done, but then we have this challenge process. And part of that, I think, is because the map is so new. Maybe if the map had been out several years and was fully vetted and we were really confident in it, we wouldn't have to have this challenge process. But right now, with the map, having gone through a few iterations, but not that long, but a few iterations that have shown that there have been problems with the map, then you've got this challenge process, and that includes both, are these areas actually broadband serviceable, but also are the speeds and the operators and the technology that they're claiming in these areas correct? And that's what's being challenged right now. So far, 36 states and territories have closed their challenge portals, and 4 are actively undertaking their challenge processes. Meanwhile, the industry waits patiently. So that's, again, in Fierce Networks. Then you've got this article in Washington Times. Now, this is not the Washington Post. This is Washington Times. Washington Post leans left, pretty far left. Washington Times leans pretty far right. I got my head going the opposite direction because I think I'm opposite on the screen there. So that is, and I think, let me make this bigger, and then I think I've got some things highlighted in here that are not showing up at the moment. Let me see if I can get them to show up somehow. Yeah, there we go. Good. That'll make it easier. So residents in rural America are eager, let me close that. Residents in rural America are eager to access high-speed internet under the $42.5 billion federal modernization program. But not a single home or business has been connected to new broadband networks nearly 3 years after President Biden signed the funding into law, and no project will break ground until sometime next year. Lawmakers and internet companies blame the slow rollout on burdensome requirements for obtaining the funds. And here's where, again, this is more right-leaning, and you would not hear this in a left-leaning article. But you've got including climate change mandates, preferences for hiring union workers, and the requirement that eligible companies prioritize the employment of justice-impacted people with criminal records to install broadband equipment. And this again these are some things. I think there's a point here that we want to be focusing on what's really important, which is getting broadband out to folks. And there are a lot of kind of pet projects or agendas that were put in here that would be an impediment actually to making that happen. The Commerce Department is also attempting to regulate consumer rates. Lawmakers say this puts them at odds with internet providers and congressional Republicans who say the law prohibits such regulation. And that's true, the law prohibits that. So, the law may not have passed had all of this been known prior, and certainly if it had been talking about, or if there had been any thought that there would be price regulations, because it specifically says that's not the case, or should not be the case. The FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, and he's a Republican, said the program's goal of providing high-speed internet to most underserved areas will not be fully realized until 2030, 9 years after its enactment. Rural areas have been waiting a long time for broadband service. Many rely on slow internet that travels over copper lines and are unable to transmit large amounts of data. Some areas have no internet at all. There hasn't been a single shovel's worth of dirt that's been even turned towards connecting people, Mr. Carr said. So again, he's a Republican on the commission. And again, this is part of the political back and forth now. I'm sure he will be very happy, and he would be very happy to have broadband, being universally deployed around the United States. I'm assuming he's voted in favor of that. I know he's voted in favor of other things that would help with broadband, probably the ACP as well. So, but political nature, silly season, we can expect stuff like this. And the same with other politicians on both sides. But if you think about Republicans, they would welcome broadband be built in their state. They're lining up to try to get these funds, but of course they want to make points if they can right now while it's not happening, and make some points that are valid as far as some of the things that are in the notice of funding opportunity and the rules for it that would hinder, delay broadband deployment, make it more expensive if you got to do climate kinds of research, those kinds of things that are not making good use of the funds. So they're going to bring that up as well. Alan Davidson, who runs the program as head of the Commerce Department's national, or head of the NTIA, praised the pace of the BEAD program. He told, do I need to click? I need to click here. There we go. He told lawmakers in May that the first 2 years were consumed by planning and preparation. And again, there needs to be planning and preparation. Now, whether it needs to be 2 years or not is questionable. And of course, we did have the map issue, which was a big part of that. Mr. Davidson said 2024 is a year of execution, the year for which we've been planning. I guess the execution part there he's talking about is, we've got some of the challenge process going in now. And, so all the broadband offices are in place, initial proposals out there, not necessarily all approved, but all of that's done. So some of this is taking place. But again, we're a pretty good ways off from anything getting deployed. States and territories approved for funding, he said, will embark on the challenge and subgrantee selection process that will fund providers to build networks. On May 15th, Mr. Davidson told Congress that the program is really a 2025-2026 shovels in the ground project. So again, from the perspective of the debate tonight, that's going to be brought up in that if Joe Biden brings up the fact that, he passed this bill that's going to provide broadband, hopefully to improve affordability and provide broadband to every citizen in the United States and make sure it's available, then it will be brought up that, well, that hasn't happened yet. They just put too many steps in the process, he said. The addition of a substantive wish list of progressive ideas they've layered in certainly didn't help with the timeline. That was Mr. Carr talking again. Senators have repeatedly written to Mr. Davidson to complain about funding requirements related to labor, climate change, and diversity and equity and inclusion that they said were added to the BEAD program after it was signed into law. The letter outlines a list of stipulations for obtaining the funds that lawmakers are saying are not a part of the law and should be eliminated. They include preferences for hiring union workers who are scarce in some rural areas. And think about that. We know we're going to have a hard time, especially if all of this kind of happens at once. If you've got a lot of states that Everybody wants to get this done. All the states want to get it done. So if they're on top of it, we're going to have a lot of states that are going to be selecting their subgrantees as quickly as possible, as soon as they're able to, and then trying to get money to those subgrantees so we can start building. And then you've got labor shortages. So, states are trying to work on that. How do we get enough labor? And if you've got these requirements that are going to make it even harder to get people that can do these jobs, then that is a problem. Requiring providers to prioritize certain segments of the workforce, such as individuals with past criminal records, when building broadband networks. Again, why prioritize that? It doesn't mean you can't allow folks like that to participate, but why prioritize it? Requiring eligible entities to account not only for current climate-related risks, but also for how the frequency, severity, and nature of these extreme events may plausibly evolve as our climate continues to change over the coming decades. That should not be something that we're weighing down this broadband deployment bill with, or this program. Lawmakers also protested provisions in the BEAD program giving preference to government-owned networks, which critics say put taxpayers at risk and have sustained financial losses around the country. And you can look at that two ways. If a municipality wants to provide the broadband, that is good, especially if it's being funded, because that will help it be more profitable once you get the broadband in the ground. And being a municipality, or let's say a small town or whatever, there should be enough customers there and enough density where it won't be expensive to operate. So it should be successful, again, especially if it's funded. And what that does, not-for-profit kind of organization, obviously they have to make enough profit to be able to maintain the network, but that can help keep costs a little bit lower than on a private network. Not a lot lower. If you look at what cities are charging for broadband service, it's not like it's this tremendously much lower cost, but it is a little bit lower a lot of times than a private provider might be. But then there's the question of, if you're funding that municipality, that government entity, it doesn't seem like a fair playing field for a private provider that wants to come in there, because they are a for-profit and they need to have a certain amount of profit for their owners or shareholders or whatever. One of the contested provisions allows only expensive fiber internet to qualify for funding, which could make rural and more remote connections much harder and far more costly. So again, this is kind of a balancing act here. So I think on with these two things that I just talked about. So on the municipalities, and then also not-for-profits, let's call them electric co-ops, are going to be the most likely that would participate there. Again, these are companies that are not-for-profit, so they can provide the service maybe at a little bit lower price. That's going to help with affordability. So that's a good goal. But again, there's concern here that there's a preference there that's kind of expressed in the notice of funding opportunity. And here it's talking about the preference for fiber. And again, you're having to kind of straddle the line here. The preference should be for fiber because we don't want to spend a lot of money to put in old technology. Certainly, we don't want to be funding. DSL, right? Old copper technology. We really don't want to be funding DOCSIS. We could if fiber is not reasonable, but I don't know of a cable operator, if they were to get funds, that would say, hey, let me go ahead and put in a HFC network. No, they're going to deploy fiber. So you really do want to put in fiber unless it's so costly that it doesn't make sense. And what the states are having to do, again, they're having to walk this line as well. So the NTIA was kind of straddling this line of, we really know it needs to be fiber, but we really know we might not be able to get fiber to every single location, especially the really, really expensive ones. So they said, we're going to have a certain definition for reliable broadband, and that's wired service, and they do include DSL, which is kind of silly, but it would be DSL, cable, fiber, and then fixed wireless licensed service that could be licensed by rule, which would include CBRS, or a combination of licensed and unlicensed, and I never quite figured out what that meant. That's reliable broadband. And then you've got, I think if I remember, it's priority broadband projects. Those are the ones the prioritized ones are going to be the ones that are supposed to be fiber. And you have to have good reasons for not deploying fiber, where it would not be deployed, and that would be for example, your extremely high cost thresholds where it's so expensive for you to deploy fiber that it would break your budget, basically. So then you consider other things, and most likely what's going to be considered is fixed wireless. Satellite's been deemed not the right technology for this. I'm not sure how you fund satellite. It's not like you're going to fund a satellite that's going to stay in geosynchronous orbit over one location. I mean, you've got these constellations that are, like Starlink, that are moving around the Earth. So the most I could see that you could fund would be helping somebody afford it, helping them afford the base station and maybe the monthly fees, affordability kind of thing. So really it's going to be fixed wireless most likely as your option there. And that there is a provision for that in there. So I think this is not a fair statement. I think the balance is correct in the notice of funding opportunity, which is let's do fiber wherever we can, as far as we can, with the money that we can, and where we can't, we can consider other technologies. And again, that's most likely going to be fixed wireless. The senator said the program's 9-step review process is likely to mire state broadband offices in excessive bureaucracy and delay connecting unserved and underserved Americans as quickly as possible. There's no doubt that the government does not do things well most of the time. It's not the best use of your money. Private enterprises that are, especially for-profit ones, because they have to make a profit, are the ones that do the best at spending money. And the government also often puts in so much red tape that it costs way more than it should. And I'm sure there's some of that. I know there's some of that going on here. Again, if we look at some of the things that they're wanting the states and the broadband operators to take into account, we know that there's some of that bureaucracy in here that are delaying things and causing costs to go up. So that means you've got fewer dollars to spend on broadband deployment. They disputed a requirement added by NTIA that eligible states participate in federal digital equity programs, which aim to ensure that all people and communities have the skills, technology, and capacity needed to reap the full benefits of our digital economy. I've talked about that recently. There was one technology think tank, somehow they were considered a think tank, that was saying that we needed more money for these kinds of programs, that we should not focus on fiber so much, that we should make sure that there's plenty of money left for these kinds of programs. I think that's totally the opposite. I agree with the statement here that really we should not be talking about these things. We shouldn't be talking about affordability, whether somebody knows how to use the internet. Let's get broadband deployed. Let's get as much of it as fiber as possible so that we know it's future-proof and we don't need to go back to the well by deploying some inferior technology when we could have put fiber in. And I hate to say it, but everything else is inferior at this point. Fiber is definitely the future-proof best technology if we can afford it. So if you want to have these things, do a separate, if you let Congress pass that separately, or, what's already in there, so it doesn't matter. But this should not be in there. We shouldn't be spending a lot of money on these things. Everything should be going towards broadband deployment. And if there's something left, then you can take the money and use it for that. The letter cited BEAD's planning section on climate resiliency, which senators said requires extensive research, reporting, and justifications that are typically well beyond the focus of expertise of state broadband offices. And again, do we really need to be considering that right now? No, I don't think so. It's not the goal of this program. So that is hurting this as far as, who might decide, how many companies might decide, we just don't want to mess with this. We're just going to go ahead and deploy where we can. We're going to use our private funds and deploy and not have to worry about all the red tape, because in the end, it's going to cost us more to have to deal with all this stuff. So that's the concern there. So I want to show one more article here. Will Trump pause BEAD? Good question. I don't think so. And it says here, if Donald Trump wins the U.S. presidential election in November, there's a chance he will pause the $42.5 billion broadband equity access and deployment program, according to one financial analyst. So this is just one analyst saying this. Paul Gallant, an analyst with TD Cowen, first suggested in March that Trump might delay the BEAD program to do a full-scale review of how NTIA is running the program with an eye toward eliminating red tape and pricing mandates. I could see them coming in and looking at that. I don't think they're going to want to pause very much at all, but I could see them coming in as quickly as possible and try to give some relief on some of the things, again, that would be causing delays, number one, and be causing the cost of deployment to go up, number two. While a pause in the program wouldn't be a positive for broadband providers, Trump could look to make adjustments such as preventing any indirect price regulation. And again, I don't know that, I don't think there's going to be there's not going to be price regulation. The indirect part would be, to kind of put price regulation in there where it's not explicit, and that should not be in there as well. You see here, however, the other analysts don't believe Trump will delay BEAD funds if he wins the White House from Joe Biden in November. Blair Levin, policy advisor to New Street Research and former high-level FCC official, told light reading that BEAD will ultimately funnel money into Republican areas. Why would he want to delay that, he wrote. And that's absolutely true. Again, once the election's over, nobody's going to be talking about how late BEAD is. They're going to be saying they're still going to be wanting BEAD to get done, but it's going to be for the reason that they want to get the money for their state to get broadband deployed. It's not going to be about the election or anything political at that point. So Levin also argued that Republican governors will lobby Trump to allow them to distribute BEAD funding quickly and without additional oversight. He added that most internet service providers are close to Republicans in Washington, D.C., and will therefore likely reinforce the Republican governor's message. And again, I think that's true. The governors of each state are going to want to get all of this money flowing as quickly as possible. So again, right now, silly season, this is a political topic. There are valid points on both sides. It's valid points from Republicans as far as maybe why some of these delays are there and how some of this money is being used for things that are not really relevant to broadband. They're kind of little pet projects, as I said. But again, we want to make sure that the money is being used properly. We want to make sure that it's used efficiently. Some of the issues that I mentioned means you're not using it efficiently. If you're saying, well, we got to do this climate research, that's not efficient. But making sure that you've got the maps done and making sure that you're doing a challenge process, so that we don't deploy and overbuild in areas that we have it. Those are all important kinds of things. So again, there's good points to be made on both sides. So tonight, again, I expect to see it in the debate. And as I mentioned, if Trump has been, if he's been talking to his advisors and kind of going through what Biden's going to say, what he's going to tout, what he's going to hit Trump with, then Trump should have a reply on that. And it most likely will be about the fact that there's not been as Commissioner Carr mentioned, a single shovel full of dirt turned over yet as far as broadband goes. So that's going to be, I think, the play tonight. If Trump has not been prepared by his team on this question, then Biden will tout it and Trump might not know what to say. But I suspect BEAD program and the EV chargers will come up as well. And as it should, because that's another thing, that the EV chargers, that 7.5 or 7.8 billion, whatever it was, that was also in the Infrastructure Act. And again, 3 years now, almost, that's over 2 years. Only 7 or 8 of those charging stations have been built. And it seems like that's been kind of forced. The whole EV thing's been forced because people don't want them. People don't want them, I guess, because there are no charging stations. That's one problem. So you put the cart before the horse, or the EV before the horse before the EV. I don't know. But in any event, people don't want them. One reason they don't want them is because they're hard to find charging stations. But the other reason is they prefer hybrids because they like to know. They don't want that range anxiety. They want to be able to drive their car and know that if they have an issue where they're far away from somewhere, that they can drive on gas as long as they need to. So if people are going to get anything, it's hybrids now. So trying to force EVs right now, not a good thing. And I think we're seeing that in the prices of EVs coming down. I guess that's reducing inflation somewhat in a sense, because the prices of EVs have come down because people don't want them. They're costing car makers a lot to make them. People don't want them. They prefer just regular internal combustion cars or a hybrid that uses both technologies if they want to be a little bit more environmental friendly and maybe reduce their cost of operating the vehicle. Hybrids right now seem to be the way to go. So that's the other thing that's going to come up, probably would be the EVs tonight. But I expect the BEAD program to be in there as well. So we'll see. Tonight, I believe it's 9 o'clock on several different stations. Obviously, CNN's hosting the debate, but several stations, including Fox News and ABC, CBS, NBC, I think they're all going to be simulcasting that at the same time. So it should be a very interesting debate, and we'll see what comes up as far as broadband during that. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. If this was interesting or you like this, if you give me a thumbs up on the video, and if you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button. I think these days, maybe once you click the subscribe button, you wind up getting the notifications unless you choose to select some other not notification kind of thing. But if you do need to click the bell, go ahead and click the bell to be notified when I'm live. And I will talk to you next time. And maybe we'll have a comment about the debate. We'll see how it goes tonight. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.